All right. Hello, HandyCon. So this session was supposed to be a bigger panel on South Asia, but the other speaker couldn't make it. So it's me, Chris here in Hong Kong, and Nick, you are in
India.
Yeah. And so in this section, we're just going to kind of have a free flow. Nick's got some pretty interesting technical background in hardware. And yeah, so I am the person that got Mike involved in Handshake by accidentally donating him a name, not accidentally. And then speaking to Nick just before I came on here, he told me that he found out about Handshake from a post that Mike did. So it's funny how the things turn into bigger things, and now we're all here thanks to Mike. Anyhow, Nick, I'll let you give a background on yourself.
Okay, so I can do that. So yeah, first of all, actually, thanks to Mike, and I owe a lot to Mike, not just this session. So we have a history of working together in the past, and very impactful for my personal life also. So let me tell you a little about me. Always been a techie, always trying to be on the forefront of tech, but my journey is something, I always loved tech and people, but as I moved forward, I understood no matter how good your tech is, it's always about people. And slowly, I started getting more into the community side of things. And now I kind of understand, and it's very clear in my head that any good tech wins only if it's adopted. In fact, even a second level tech can win over the first level tech if the second level tech is adopted more than the first level tech. So more than tech, it's about making more and more, getting more and more people on your side. So I also run a community here in India. So community has stuck with me ever since I did a startup weekend with Mike. And then after that, I was also the Mozilla community leader for Shenzhen, China. And I was into hardware and stuff. So Shenzhen was 8 years, and I learned a lot, like really a lot of when you say hardware and electronics, the people think it's made in China. I think it's mostly made in Shenzhen. That's how cluster based and how concentrated Shenzhen is. And if you can disrupt something from Shenzhen, you can disrupt the entire hardware world. So it's actually sitting at the root of things. And so I learned a lot from that ecosystem, which we'll talk further. But yeah, this is largely me. Now I'm excited about HNS. So HNS I had heard, but I was not going to jump on it if I had not seen Mike's video. Then I told Mike, hey, this looks interesting. And in fact, I told Mike, my worry is it's not the tech. I've seen this tech many times. Different people have this tech. It's about, this is getting adopted. This is moving. Do you think we'll be able to move big? Or someone else would move big before these guys move big? Who takes, so this is where we can probably drift a little.
Yeah, and so I had heard you mention this in a Clubhouse a few weeks back, but I think Nick has a really interesting insight. We had Drew Rosner on earlier, and he was saying that if this can't get adopted by mainstream browsers, then there's no chance, it's dead in the water. But Nick has a different strategy that goes a layer further, starting at the hardware. I'll let him expand on that based on his experience in China and firmware stuff.
Okay, so I'll say that idea. So basically, what I realized is being a techie, sometimes I was first in the tech world. As you go out more and more into the world, you realize less than 5% of the world cares about what the tech is. They just want to get things working. I think DNS is critical to this technology because you need all your DNSs to point to the new server. That's when this will get, where normal people would be able to use it. And a lot of people probably don't even know what is DNS on their router, what is the DNS setting on their router. None of this is known. So my idea was that, and I've seen this happen in China, that when the mobile revolution happened, there were a lot of people, and in fact, I don't know if people know, Xiaomi also did this. Xiaomi was initially a firmware company and not a phone company. They used to give away firmware free that you can download and make your stuff very cool, your phone very cool. So the idea and the way they monetized is they used to put few apps pre-built into it, and the app gets so much downloads without people really downloading it. So China does things differently. So I said on that Clubhouse room that you can do the same thing with routers. What you can do with routers is if this DNS is pre-built into most of the routers that are going out of China, and a lot of people don't care. Trust me, a lot of companies don't care. I mean, in the US, they're very specific, but there are so many countries like Turkey, Indonesia, India, where most of the people, the brand owners who come are just traders. They don't understand the tech so much. They want a cool looking firmware, whatever, as long as it works. They're just going to test everything works. I'm getting the right price. And even China itself, the market in Shenzhen, is constantly fighting on optimizing the cost of the hardware. But very few companies, I don't know how many people know, but very few companies make firmware in Shenzhen. So they just copy whatever firmware is available for the same hardware. And the entire fight is around optimizing the hardware cost. Someone would invest a lot and buy a lot of chips and get down the price lower. Someone would produce. So they keep competing on the hardware, but very few people do something on firmware, which is what Xiaomi did. Xiaomi came in and worked on the firmware. OnePlus came and worked on the firmware. They made a good combination of hardware and firmware, but there are like another 90% of the companies which don't know. So if you can give something of that sort to these companies, they'll just pick it and put it into all routers. Was the idea? Yeah.
So how would we get HNS shipped on the hardware? Like what would the route be to make that happen?
Okay, so the route is basically what you need to see is I mean, I'll answer in a VC way. You know, VCs has this question: why now? Why now? Why can this happen now if it could not happen in the past? Why now? What is changing is a lot of disruptions happen at different time periods. We're at the crux of Wi-Fi 6. Wi-Fi was Wi-Fi for a very long period of time. And now there is Wi-Fi 6 coming in. So that means a whole lot of routers, people will upgrade to Wi-Fi 6. And there is another thing that we are missing. Browsers are for humans. The Internet of People revolution has already happened. The Internet of Things revolution is still to happen. That means it's not just that you are going to connect to the Internet, but a lot of things are going to connect. And these are also going to get on the DNS. So in this transition, the router is critical because all of these devices are not going to self-program their DNS. They're just going to go to the router, and the router, whatever DNS it points to, is going to get served. You're just going to get your pages served. So now how the market works in China is that, like I said, firmware is something, it's very expensive as a skill in China to make. Few people invest in software because software guys are expensive, and hardware a lot of people know in China. So I moved back to India and I got this learning from there, and I started a firmware company with the whole intention of selling to China. That I understand this is the gap there. The firmware is not so cool, So if you go and give them, and my original idea was to sell to them, but now that this has come up, I think maybe I will just give away the firmware free, make something super cool for Wi-Fi 6, and in many cases, what they want is something like Xiaomi, because Xiaomi and OnePlus can afford to make the firmware internally themselves, and most of them else cannot. So you make something like that, and that's what they aspire, something more cool. If you just make that firmware, and I'll tell you how much gap exists in the world.
So just quick to sum up. So your proposal is, from your experience in China, that people will take on firmware because it's so expensive. So if you can create some firmware that they can embed on the phones that people are going to buy anyway, that's kind of a hack around the browser problem. And you might need to expand a little more on like how the Chinese system works. I know you were in Shenzhen. I may have met you at the startup weekend that you and Mike had done. I know Mike from Shenzhen. I'm in Hong Kong right now. But I think people that don't have experience on the ground in Shenzhen really understand that system, especially if you're coming from the US, maybe Western Europe, where like rules and regulations are really, really hardcore enforced, and things are a lot looser in China. So maybe expand a little how that gets in. But I guess just to wrap up real quick, the idea is getting this already put on the firmware that people are already buying in the next generation of the Wi-Fi 6
right,
and the phones, so that we can skip the browsers altogether to get huge distribution.
True. So that's the idea, that we get into all the routers of future, and it's just pre-built. So every router that's shipping, a lot of routers that are shipping that are not top level brands are like just shipping with this. So second part, why this can happen out of Shenzhen. Now people need to understand Shenzhen. There is a word in Shenzhen called as Shanzai, the Shanzai market, and it's a huge size market. So there are big brands who control everything that would go into it, like probably Linksys will never do this, and a lot of these top level brands wouldn't. But how it works in China is once those guys go and establish the market, like the Linksyses of the world, or probably the Apples of the world, they kind of create a product and they make Wi-Fi 6 big. The whole lot of Chinese Shanghai market and Alibaba guys are going to jump in. It's a whole army. How it works is someone designs a product, then every factory takes it, then they make those brochures, then every girl on Alibaba sales is going to send out that mail to a lot of people. Hey, we have routers. Someone's doing 80, someone's doing 70, someone's doing 74, 75. But then this whole army of China just starts blasting Wi-Fi 6. We have Wi-Fi 6. We have Wi-Fi 6. And then the whole idea is someone makes it 80, the next person's thinking is make it at 79 and blast it. I'm going to get it at 70. So they just focused on cost and giving more to the customer. So, and in that element, the biggest cost, which they cannot control, and they normally don't, they just copy the firmware. They just copy the firmware. So because they don't have engineering teams to make firmware. It's a very expensive team to have. But hardware is like something you can copy very quickly. You can just use just a bulk purchase hardware. So if you release into that market, and it has to be done strategically, because there are top guys, and how this works is, I don't know how much depth you want in this. I can really go down to the chip level and say how it works is MTK is the dominant player there in that market. So there is some guy who has the distribution for MTK because he licenses that chip, and then he designs something, and that's what every factory takes. So there are only 2 or 3 people who do this. So one more thing that happened, and is happening actually, it used to be MIPS all along. The routers are all MIPS based architecture because MIPS is cheap. But in the Wi-Fi 6 space, there are only 3 chips right now, one by Qualcomm, Broadcom, and then the MTK. But all 3 of them are using ARM. Okay.
And he's an ARM fellow or innovator. Maybe you can explain what that is and what you're able to do with that. And
okay.
Also, he's kind of looking for some people to partner with to make this happen. So we'll give your contacts out at the end, and hopefully there's somebody out there watching this either now or in the on the YouTubes later to try and make this happen. So yeah,
sure. That's what the intention of this is. I'm being so open about it. So what is ARM doing, and what is the ARM innovator thing? So ARM every year selects few people who they find promising, will do something cool on their technology, and then they give us budgets to do something and drive it into the market. So normally, so what we have done is we have done this AI firmware. Our firmware is not simple. It can also do AI on the device itself. And we can do it at extremely low power hardware. Again, the Chinese thing, I learned it from China that no matter how good features you have, you still need to control the price. So I built the firmware company ground up. Took me 3 years though to build it that way. But now we are able to do it at a very optimal cost, and something that if you want to sell to China, you need to have control on your cost. You cannot have great features and come to China and say, hey, I have great features, will you buy for this extra money? No, I need all the great features, but I still need it at the same price that I'm selling, because that's how it works in Shenzhen. So I had this in my mind before I designed my firmware company. So ARM picked me up and gave me, okay, so I'm one of the innovators with them. So they kind of give budget for proposals. So I can send this proposal that, hey, on Wi-Fi 6, I think we can do something and release a firmware. So more and more of ARM continues to sell, before MIPS or these guys come in. If you make something cool that is probably AI, or even doesn't even need AI, it just needs a very good looking browser. Very good looking interface. And I'll give you the example of how much gap exists between the hardware world and the software world. Like, you will see so many cool UI on software, right? So many apps look so cool, so many websites look so cool. And the browser when you log into a router and do the admin kind of login, it's exactly the same web page. But people don't know how to get that kind of cool web page into a router. And that page is actually running on your browser. It's not running on the router. It's only stored there. So it doesn't need the compute of the router. That means it's not a compute problem. It's a tech problem. How do I get this cool web interface to work with this hardware, inside a firmware? Because it's complex. So that is the possibility of how boring the router UI today looks to how how cool websites and apps have become, and we stand there as a bridge, that we can put all of this coolness into the router, and we have the next generation of cool routers for our selfish interest, a little bit of it, that this DNS is pre-built into it, and people don't care because it's working, right? All of the current websites also can be opened, but what it gives you is like, just one of my friend, I spoke with him. I think Chad was also there on that room. I did not get back to him. I asked him, what is the quantity that we can do every month? He said, I think we can do 500,000 every month. Very easy.
500,000
every month. Yeah, that's what he's selling already. So he said like 500,000 looks easy. I think with Wi-Fi 6, the market will grow, and because Wi-Fi 6 is going to be there for next 2-3 years. I mean, as that option, now it's $100 above price. It will come down, and that option would just go. So and on Wi-Fi 6, again, I said it's ARM. So if you start there, it's intersection of multiple things happening at the same time, right? That we are moving to Wi-Fi 6. There's the technology waiting there to happen and going for mass adoption, so people upgrade their routers, and there's this huge opportunity sitting in front of us. Then I have a firmware company that I can help with, understand the Shenzhen market so well. So there's just too many pieces, but I think I still cannot put them all together, because there's someone who needs to come from top level and say, and that's what I told Mike, someone at top level who's really can drive it. I'm more of a techie. Somebody needs to give me confidence that, yes, I'll drive it. Just do the firmware. We'll drive it together. This is where I am. Yeah, thanks for...
So, excellent. So, this is a little off track from the what's happening in South Asia, but I felt like, since the other speaker wasn't here, that this is a pretty unique, innovative proposal to put out a distribution, alternative distribution way that routes around the browsers. So we're coming up on time, I think. Maybe open to some questions, if anyone wants to put questions in chat for Nicole or Nick.
Yeah, someone did ask a question. It's an interesting question. Lee Lovell.
Did you can you see it there?
Yeah, he's talking about the UK top 2 broadband providers. Yeah.
Okay, so the issue with the UK, 2 top brand providers, possibly top 5, do not let DNS be changed in the provided router. This means it's currently per device or a middleman box in front of the router. So how would that work in your scenario?
Also, he has a very valid point. Like, the top brands will not allow, and that's especially US and UK market. And so from Shenzhen is a very different perspective, that US is a huge market for sure, but there is a lot that the Chinese sell. And there's a lot of replacement market. UK maybe is a more controlled market. I have really no idea of UK. But we tend to ignore markets like India, Africa, Middle East. All of these countries don't care. Turkey, consumes like crazy. And Turkey exports to Europe. So a lot of people buy routers beyond what their broadband providers provide. So, and if it's going to be Wi-Fi 6, so here you have to beat them in the game. As in, those guys are going to take their own sweet time to plan around Wi-Fi 6 and include the next strategy. You need to be ahead of the game and keep the Wi-Fi 6 router ready, so people are upgrading before the broadband provider is providing them a Wi-Fi 6 router with a plan and saying that, okay, buy and pay this extra cost. You're beating them on both the price and the technology faster. So that's why I said I'm not enough to drive this. There is someone at top level. So you will have to find ways, and which is what the Chinese do. I think I can personally bet on the Chinese sales. They're very aggressive. Those girls, every single day, they email a lot of people and they get sales, even in Europe, in many countries. And, the market that they tap to is also something that brings in numbers. And once you have the numbers on your side, that means if, say, Namebase is showing that, well, so many people across the world are hitting my DNS server, you're already someone in the space now.
Yeah. Okay. Another question we have that was great is this is from Dean Chandler. With this router DNS setup, you won't have to pick one or the other. It would access traditional internet and handshake domains at the same time, right?
Yeah, that's what I think the new resolver at Namebase is promising to do, right? This resolver will resolve both. So these servers need to be like that it resolves both these names. So,
yeah, correct. Yeah. I think Dean, Mike just posted the hdns.io.
Right.
Just came out. A lot of people haven't picked up on that yet. Well, great. If anybody else has a question, now's the time to chime in. And then how could anybody get in touch with you if they want to?
My LinkedIn. I can drop my LinkedIn.
Okay.
I'm pretty active on my LinkedIn.
Are you in the?
I can put it if you want my email. It's simple. So I can put both. Just give me LinkedIn here first.
Oh, can you?
So this is like a VC, elevator pitch.
Yeah.
Okay. So the idea is that a lot of routers sell, but the game is in firmware. If you can create a firmware before others do in the Wi-Fi space market and get a lot and make it free for a lot of people, a lot of companies who cannot afford to make the firmware are going to download and use your firmware, and that firmware just has this option to pre-built in. So whenever they download, a lot of people also individually upgrade their routers with OpenWRT and all of that. So you just take the market the way Xiaomi took it with their firmware and then became a very commanding force in that space. A lot of people just tried the Xiaomi firmware and then they went and bought the phones. So you're trying to do something similar.
Maybe I'm not sure if we've got to get off here. If we do, somebody from one of the hosts let us know. But maybe it'd be useful. I remember hearing you tell the story about the example of an app or something that basically got its distribution via firmware in Xiaomi. You'd given that example, I believe, in a Clubhouse or when we spoke at some point.
Right.
That might help people understand what you're getting at, because I feel like it's still kind of abstract for people that aren't.
Yeah, right. I think it's abstract for people in the West because they think really the straight way, the legal way, and this becomes kind of blockages. Like TikTok, actually, this is how they got adopted. They got into so many phones pre-built. So the Chinese are kind of working in a different way, and the West is working in a different way, and it's always hard for everyone, right? I've lived in China, and that's why I had a shock for at least 2-3 years. I was aligning myself to Shenzhen, and a lot of people find it hard to align to that thinking. How are you doing this? This is probably not the way to do it. It's a complete different thinking. So that's why I completely understand if they're finding it hard. How does this work? But when you have seen it work, you know that people have paid for putting their app onto so many phones when the Chinese phones were selling, and until the brands took over fully. Now,
can you give a concrete example of an app that did it via the firmware and then became a really popular app because it was already pre-installed on the phone?
Actually, like I said, TikTok has done this. TikTok has done this. They actually went through a lot of phones in China had it pre-installed, and during I know of a friend who was doing this for India market. And I'll also tell you another surprising thing about Chinese culture. Sometimes you can get all of this done for free.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it sounds like it's an extra feature, and like I know Mike and myself, it's hard if you haven't seen it, but we've been in the the world's largest electronics market in Shenzhen, and the kind of opportunity there, and the speed of innovation, and also the all the random stuff that you can actually get done, and then all those people's connections to the factories. It's almost like some of the stalls there are supplying all the factories, and that's how things move so fast. And so, like, if you're adding an extra feature and providing it for free, and then all of a sudden it just spreads in those things, and now you have native distribution in maybe it's not in the Western like mainstream things that might have to go via the Puma browser or whatever, but you've got Africa, India, South America, all these places where it's already native. So I mean that jumps a huge gap in distribution.
Correct. And South America was where people were doing this a lot, and India was a place where people were doing this app thing a lot. So I missed some point that was in my mind. Yeah, it's okay. I think we can continue.
Yeah. And then if that usage is happening, and there's actually sites and apps and things that are online, and people are using the HNS sites, then you have usage that could influence Firefox, Chrome, and Safari to actually integrate this stuff because it's being used in all these other places. So it would be something coming like the in Africa with the people going mobile first and never having the landline. So they actually make a technology jump because they don't have the legacy systems. So this is kind of like a Trojan horse way to do it via the electronic distribution that comes out of China.
Right. And oh yeah, that was the point. So there have been cases in the speed of China. Like there have been cases where, you know, people launched something on Kickstarter and they were going to ship out their product before that Chinese made a better one.
Like I've done a few Kickstarters, and so I'm very familiar with that. And I used to do like the spinner, some kind of
fidget,
the fidget spinner, and the factories in China had that out before the Kickstarter was done.
And everyone had it. Like it was like all over Hochangbe markets. Everyone was, and the distribution reached much everywhere before the actual original guy can reach. So China's, and you must have lived there to see this happen. That these guys, given something, they can just go with it and sell like crazy. So
I guess the takeaway from this is like instead of fighting against that, like knowing that system's there, which most people that haven't seen it don't know about it, but would be getting in the flow of that system and having HNS be a part of that, where it just naturally flows organically into all these things because it's an extra feature added at the hardware layer via firmware for free that they give out to all these kind of, I don't know if you call them hackers, but the Shenzhen, I think it's like the mountain pirates. Shenzhen. So
So actually, you had a wonderful point that you said, like if these people take it, and then a lot of websites are getting accessed, there's a reverse disruption possible, but then the big guys feel left out because there are so many sites on the new domain, and that is getting accessed in so many countries that they are not part of. So, that's why adoption is so critical. Once a lot of people adopt, you cannot stop it. You have to go where most of the people are. Numbers just work.
And the speed that the stuff happens in China is just, it's like that best example is a fidget spinner from Kickstarter, and the factories and stuff were distributing it before the month was done on Kickstarter. So any other questions? Johnny said we've got some more time. I'm not sure. I know we've got a good thing coming up next. But I hope this was valuable for people. Thanks a lot, Nick. Thanks, Mike, for organizing this, and everybody who's being here. And for people that aren't here, if anybody out there that's watching this knows people who should see this, once Mike gets this on his SkyInclude YouTube channel, please share it with them or connect with Nick, because the spread of HNS and building sites and doing stuff on this helps us all. All right.
Someone is still typing a question. It seems he says one more question in the queue.
Okay, let me see here. I'm not seeing the question queues. What about other open source routers like Firmware's, OpenSense? What about other open source routers, firmware like OpenSense, PFSense, OpenWrite? I guess one thing to add here is like what you're talking about isn't about open source routers. It's a layer. He's talking about actually at the factory, this stuff being installed before it's installed on the new devices in the boxes. So like the users don't even know that setting's like set up in there. And you get it installed by giving out the firmware for free, because that's the expensive part at the factories, by telling them it's an extra feature. And then it spreads and they trade all the stuff. Right. And then when you're buying that new Wi-Fi or something ahead of your ISP giving you the upgrade, say in the UK, that's already pre-installed on your system. But it would probably have much more spread for all of the commerce that's going on with South America, Africa, India, these places where it's a little bit more traders and not as much of a organized system as we're familiar with in the West.
And Turkey. I mean, I don't want to ignore this country, because that's what I learned in Shenzhen, that a lot of supply to Europe happens from Turkey. Okay. Those guys are also traders. And aftermarket in Turkey. Europe.
So you're saying that there's factories like this in Turkey too that we could also...
No, the buyers in Turkey also buy from Shenzhen. They're also traders.
Got it.
Got it. From Turkey, you can enter Europe. So these distribution network, actually China is something that is not fully studied. You can ship something within US, the cost to ship something is higher than shipping from Shenzhen.
Yeah.
There's a scale that they have achieved. So distribution is a whole. I think Mike has this global channel, and then maybe he can discuss it sometime. But distribution is very powerful. China has amazingly good distribution channels.
All right, we're out of time, guys.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot. You've got his contacts. Cheers. Jehan is up next, and I don't know how to exit this room, so anybody help me out.
Me too.